an absolute passion for strategy, leadership, and
I wish I
execution.
could remember the name of
And
it. There were these dolls that just kind of, you press the button and it said, that's the best idea I've ever
Somebody
heard.
look at,
Or
why should they look at companies that maybe aren't at their peak right now? Is it that they brought in someone like yourself, or that they brought in a new CEO that's quick? Hey everyone, welcome to the VentureLoop Executive Insider podcast. Again, I'm Jeremy McCarthy, CEO of VentureLoop, and I am really honored today. We've got Marc Kirshbaum with us. I have known Marc for quite a while. Marc was a former client of mine when we did outsourced payroll and benefits to one of his companies, and really amazing guy, so we have stayed in contact all these years later. Marc is an executive leader, advisor, author, turnaround specialist. He's spent a lot of his career working with companies that are at a critical inflection point, and he's led and rebuilt a number of businesses, got a lot of experience with investing, knows the insides of organizations, and importantly too, he's recently written a book. It's called The 11 Primal Spaces, Awakening Next Level Leadership by Reconnecting to What Makes Us Human. So timing of that feels especially important right now. Marc, I really appreciate you joining me here today, and maybe why don't you start, just give us a little bit of a background on yourself. What do you want people to know about you?
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. I'm thrilled to be here with you, and I value the relationship we've built over years. We've established trust, we've established camaraderie, common values, and a desire to build. And so that has been both fun, it's been enjoyable, and I'm grateful to still have this relationship with you to the point where you invited me on this journey with you.
Rivalry. We do have a Giants-Dodgers rivalry as well. It's not much fun today. But
I was going to say, can it really? Yeah. It's a rivalry as long as we keep winning on my side. In any event, good luck to the Giants for the future. Great to be here. My background really, just to highlight a little of what you said, I've spent my career building and turning around. I always find myself in those situations, whether it's me doing it as a leader or I'm helping other leaders do it. I have a passion, an absolute passion for strategy, leadership, and execution, and taking organizations, if they are well established, if have lost their way, to help them find their way and reestablish their center, and at the same time help early stage companies who haven't yet done that, at least the positive side of establishing their center, help them identify that and build a plan with a lot of focus, a lot of strong communication, a lot of execution, and as a very important part of that, what you're very focused on is building the right team. And that means building the right team for the moment in time, which should be something that is continuing to evolve. And I always look at it as for leaders, as one of the most critical areas for them to spend their time is on people and on the team, because that's critical in terms of being able to build a strategy, successfully execute, and deliver for the three parts of the business that I consider the key parts of the business: your employees, your customers, and your shareholders. So I do that with passion, and decided after all this time, I had different motivations and inspirations, which we can talk about later if you want, to write the book. 2.5 years in the making of actual writing, 20 years of note-taking and thoughts and ideas and experiences, to turn that into what became the 11 Primal Spaces, which is launching on August 4th of this year.
Awesome. Well, why don't we jump right into that then? So, you do, as you say, have years leading, advising, rebuilding, putting teams together. And you said it's 2.5 years in the making. Now, what kind of was the genesis where you decided, I've got to get this book out? What prompted that?
Thanks for asking. There's a macro answer to that, and there's a micro answer. The macro answer is everything that's been going on in the world over the last 5-6 years. We've never had so much connectivity in history as we do now, but we've never felt so disconnected, I believe, both as leaders and as people and individuals and communities than we do now. And so I was inspired by a combination of what we experienced during COVID, which was our kind of our forced disconnection from human connection, which has had a sadly lasting and profound effect on individuals and organizations and relationships. Secondly, seeing a world that has frankly become polarized, where people have stopped listening to each other. We've wanted to kind of label people. You're with me, you're against me. You're this, you're that. You are or you aren't. And I believe the world is, and relationships and people are both deeper and more nuanced than that for our communities to exist, and for us to get along and achieve what I lay out in the 11 primal spaces that are critical. And those were some of the critical components that were the macros of the time. So you look at, COVID, technology advancement, and lack of ability for people to keep communicating with each other and build relationships on the macro level. And on the micro level, for me personally, about 2.5 years ago, traveling to Israel right after the war broke out in October of 2023. And I found myself, Jeremy, visiting the military cemetery that I've been to many times in the past. And I'm walking down a path that used to be a walkway, and it was now fresh graves. And I'm watching as two soldiers next to me are digging the graves for two soldiers who had been killed the day before. And you knew exactly who was going to be placed in those graves. And I looked at all of these fresh graves of individuals whose lives had been sadly cut short. But I also looked at it from a different way, and I said, they all lived purposeful lives. They were short, sadly, yet they were purposeful. Am I living the purposeful life that I should be living to its fullest? My purpose hasn't changed in 15 or 20 years since I've wrote it down and have kept it as part of my mantra, which is to create, inspire, and be a part of special moments for myself and others. And that was my wake-up call to myself to say, I'm going to put this into writing, and I'm going to scream it from the mountaintops and hopefully purposefully impact organizations, people, and lives through the 11 primal spaces.
Awesome. That's a good starter primer on this. So when you talk about primal spaces, that brings to mind a lot of different ideas of what exactly that alludes to. Give us a better understanding. What does that really mean?
Yeah, so primal to me, and as I use them in the book, these are spaces that have been part of our evolution as humans and as societies, and they are both anatomical in our physical development and also sociologically in our development as communities, and as individuals. And so I look at the combination of that and add in the layer that they are things that have made us who we are as human beings. By the way, we're called human beings, not really human doings, but we can get into later how I look at doing and being as coordinate. It's not an or, it's an and. But as human beings, how we've evolved, and the need to look back on primal, basically meaning they existed already, and how we bring them back into defining who we are, and the three different components of the book: who we are as individuals. So they're the spaces that are personal. The second set of spaces are those that are shared. And the third are those that I call transcendent spaces.
Now, from the awareness perspective and, digging into the idea of awareness, in business, leaders are usually rewarded for, as you mentioned, doing, action. You're rewarded for moving fast, making decisions, hitting numbers, solving problems. But you seem to suggest that leadership really starts before action's taken, and it starts with awareness. Give a better insight into that. Why is that so important?
Yeah, I believe that we all are put on this earth to contribute uniquely our skills, our talents, and bringing our interests to the table, right? And so awareness is identifying from within who we are, taking the time to pause, lift our head up. I have this concept in the book of standing upright. We evolved into being able to stand upright, but now looking down at our devices and not using our ears and our mouth in the proportion they were giving to us, is causing us to bend over again. So how do we stand upright? How do we become aware from the inside of who we are, who we want to be, and bring that to the table? And that's why I put awareness as the very first space. Taking that time to understand who we are, what we stand for. I said a moment ago what I believe my purpose is. If I'm wrong, I'm not in a hurry for our maker to tell me that I'm wrong. I'd like to keep living a lot longer in good health. And once we can be aware of who we are, you made the comment about, in organizations, it's about delivering results. Yes, I believe there's a component of that is not just what we deliver, but it is how we deliver it for two reasons. One, ethics and values and morals still have a place to play in this. And secondly, if it's going to be sustainable, it has to be because of your leadership style and who you are is going to create sustainability, followership, the organization, the loyalty, the customers that is necessary to maintain and then continue to grow your organization. So to sum that up, if I can, being aware of who you are and then aligning what you do around who you want to be is critical. And once you know that, you then have a good sense of getting to the second space, which is understanding, what your beliefs are, right? And then building your resilience through your actions. And if you know then who you are in those first three spaces, then you can bring your whole self to the shared spaces, to your organizations, to your communities, to your family.
So why don't we have some fun and dig a little deeper on that? I mean, you've got a lot of experience. You've seen a lot of teams, a lot of organizations, a lot of executives. Why don't you help us bring this into a real life situation, and help people who maybe are executives or getting to that point, they're growing into an executive role, and maybe they either haven't been successful, they've recently, faced some challenges. In your experience, what does it look like when somebody is good at executing, is considered a leader, but they don't have that awareness piece? I mean, what does that really look like to you when somebody is missing that?
So let me throw it back to you. Are you asking the question in the context of for them in a self-reflective way, or when they're looking at others in their organization?
I would say self-reflective. So and really more so, when you've seen people that kind of lack that piece, because obviously this is one of your core values, that primal pieces in the book.
Yeah.
So you're obviously seeing that in your interactions with teams and executives. What does that kind of look like to you? Like if there's a person who wants to be a leader out there and they feel like something's missing, what have you seen in people you've said, well, they're missing the awareness piece. Clearly this is not something that they're focused on, and if they had more awareness, this is what their actions and their trajectory would look like.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple thoughts on that. First is when people are trying to be someone else, they're aspiring to mirror someone else in the organization. I don't know if you remember those old dolls they had that were called the what was it called? It wasn't Attaboy. Ah, I wish I could remember the name of it. There were these dolls that just kind of, you press the button and it said, that's the best idea I've ever heard, or you're the
Sounds like something
greatest
from The
boss.
Office.
Yeah, exactly. It predates The Office. But, where someone is not comfortable in their own skin to be able to bring their own best self to the table. And I think that requires a willingness of people to speak up. And I think that's one of the traits that could be missed that you're talking about. In an appropriate setting, when I'm leading organizations, one of the ground rules I lay with my teams is to say, you can say anything to me, right? Say it in a respectful way and say it in the right setting. If you come in my office and say, Mark, I think that's the worst idea I've ever heard. Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. Why? Right? If you say that in front of the team, Mark, I think you are a blankety blank. That's probably not the best way to handle it. But the willing, the tied into that, Jeremy, is another rule of mine, which is don't ever say after the fact when something happens, oh, I knew that was going to happen. And you didn't say anything, right? What do you mean you knew that was going to happen and you didn't say anything, right? You have an obligation to your colleagues, to the organization, to our customers to speak up. And great leaders are willing to surround themselves with people who are even greater and stronger than themselves, right? I do that in the organizations I build. And then I realized, you know what? I did that personally in my life too, because I married someone who's a heck of a lot smarter than I am, right? So the willingness to expose yourself, the willingness to be vulnerable, the willingness to listen. I alluded to the quote earlier without giving it credit, but to the Greek philosopher Epictetus, who said we should use our ears and our mouth in the proportion in which they were given to us. As I paraphrase it, listen, ask a lot of questions. Formulate your thoughts and ideas as a leader based upon what you hear. Verify that back with your team, and then build a plan and let everyone play a role. Don't take credit for everything. I could keep going on this, but those are the type of things that I see being a difference between great leaders who are truly, not talking organizations built to last, but leaders who are built to last, meaning they can last in the organization and with themselves without burning out.
So when you're hiring a team and you're interviewing, senior level executives, what are the things you're asking about or looking for when you're trying to get a sense of somebody's leadership ability and whether they have that awareness?
Yeah, it's a great question. I wrote down a quote that's in the book that I'll share with you. And this has to do both with leadership and hiring, from Carl Jung, who said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, right? So when I look to interview and when I'm looking to hire, the resume is a great piece of paper, right? That tells me a bit of what someone has done. It gives me, assuming that it's honest, right? And it's not what some profiles have become, which is taking credit for everything that has happened in an organization. But I try to interview to get an understanding of not just what they have done, but who they are. Who is this person sitting across from me? What are their qualities? How do they show me their adaptability? How do I see their emotional intelligence? How can I tell that they are creative problem solvers? And so I do that by listening to the stories that people are willing to tell about themselves. They're situational questions. They're ways to listen to the answer to understand how their character shines through. Are they altruistic? Are there things they're doing in their life that are trying to help others? Are they connected to community? Can I see the qualities that I can't teach in people that I want them to come to the table with that are critical: compassion, kindness, empathy, charity. Do they bring those qualities to the table? Because those are the leadership traits that I want to see in people. And then I can check the box and see, oh yeah, and they've applied these in their career per their resume and their answers.
Gotcha. Now, on that leadership topic, I want to explore leadership under pressure. And I think you are an ideal candidate to talk to about that because, as we mentioned at the beginning, you have been a turnaround artist. And even the company that you were my client with was a turnaround. And I think, certainly that has got to be one of the highest pressure situations you can put yourself in, because it's a company that's already either going the wrong direction or on the verge of failure.
Yeah.
I don't know, sometimes turnaround just means let's keep it on life support until we can figure out how to sell this or recover some of the capital that's been invested. But can you speak a little bit to, how do leaders, how do the executives you hire, what is it that you look for in finding people who can actually handle that pressure? And I'm curious, what is it you think about you that allows you to thrive in those situations? Because obviously you didn't do it once and say, all right, I did my time, that's enough for me, I'm going to check the box and tell people I've done a turnaround situation and now I'll go to something more fun. I mean, you were a glutton for punishment. You kept coming back. So there's obviously something
I still do it.
about it.
I still do it. I still do it. I have a business that I'm the strategic advisor for, and I'm actively involved in overseeing it. I've turned around this business, Jeremy, 1.5 times already, and I'm in the process of turning it around again. And my attitude, I think it just goes to personality. My attitude is, and we'll do it, right? Because failure is not an option to me. It might be necessary at some point down the road if we hit a wall, but right now, no, we're building a plan and we're executing. And so I think about turnarounds and what it takes. You use the medical analogy. I forget what you said, but basically on life. Oh, you said life support.
Yeah.
It really, that analogy works. You have to kind of know what stage your company's in. Are we in triage, right? Which we're just trying to assess the patient and figure out what's going on. That's first. Do you then go into intensive care because this patient is truly, meaning the company, is truly on life support, right? And then, you got to understand the vital signs and how do we move this patient to stability to eventually get them to kind of be a regular patient in the hospital and to get them out of the hospital, right? Because the other option is two other options. Carrying this analogy may be way too far. You either unfortunately, they flatlined and you have to end them being the business, or the other option is maybe you transfer them to another hospital, meaning you've sold the company, right? Yeah. And so I look at those different scenarios. I think the most important quality, though, Jeremy, is calmness. I used to work with a doctor in one of my businesses, a drug development company, and we were sitting across from each other's offices, and I yell out, "Oh, crap." And he comes running in my office. He's like, "What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong?" I'm like, I lost a document, right? I just lost the work I've created. And he says to me, and I just remember this, like, you have to understand, as a doctor, I was trained that you can never say, "Oh, crap." Right? You don't look at a patient and look at their file and go, not so good. Right?
Well,
so it's
like
the ability.
Occasionally I'm driving and my wife will say, "Oh," and I'm like, "Whoa, what's going on?
Yeah, exactly. Don't scare me like that.
Yeah. It's like,
yeah.
You can't just blurt out, "Oh," while I'm driving.
And so it's both keeping the calm yourself as the leader and setting that example and helping others stay calm and focused. The best way I know how to do that is to build a plan, right? When a conversation becomes about chaos or a personal conversation, I thought we were going to do this. I thought you said this. Oh, I thought you meant that, right? That's wasted time, wasted energy, and it's actually almost, creating speed bumps in your ability to accelerate. Instead, by having a plan and having a document that people have signed up for and agree upon, again, it could be a work in progress. It could change because you get new data or something changes, you make progress, and you agree to change the plan. But if you have that plan that's kind of your constitution for the organization, that helps create calm because it allows the conversation to say, hey, folks, let's not get in a tizzy. Let's remember, this is what we said we were going to do. This is where we are, right? And so by turning it to be about the document and the plan instead of you, me, chaos, that doesn't work very well. We've all watched enough hospital TV shows. The drama is there for the drama, but it's not the way hospitals and emergency rooms effectively function. Right. So I think by bringing that calm to the table and building a plan and then executing and keeping track of how you're doing against your goals is the best one can do. And just breathe. Just breathe.
So I've got kind of a unique angle, a question to ask you about. So, most people looking for new companies or being open to new positions, everybody wants the next unicorn. They want the company that's rapidly growing, that's going to either go IPO or get a $1 billion acquisition from Meta or Alphabet or whoever. But obviously, when you come into a turnaround situation, oftentimes have to hire new executives to help you turn a company around. And for a lot of talented people, they can be a little nervous thinking, well, these guys are clearly not going in the right direction. So obviously there's a lot of opportunity in companies that are not performing well that turn around. I mean, I just spoke to somebody not that long ago who he went to a company, was doing okay, then it was literally on the verge of bankruptcy, and they turned it around and eventually sold the company for over $1 billion, and he made out very well financially and just career-wise and everything else. But if you were an executive on the outside when they were not at their peak, you would have looked at that company and said, oh, they don't look like they're going in a very good direction. I'm not going to look at them. And as we know, how many times have we seen people think they found that next home run company and they go there and they're there for 3 years and they realize this company's going nowhere. The VCs are shutting it down now, or they're going to cash out, or they're selling it for parts. So
my spreadsheets of my stock option values were a waste of time.
Exactly. I was here planning my beach house, and now I might be living on the beach. So so help kind of explain what are really the upsides. What should somebody look at, and why should they look at companies that maybe aren't at their peak right now? Is it that they've brought in someone like yourself, or that they brought in a new CEO that's clearly going to change the direction? Or is there another sign or signal that they can see that says, okay, this is not in the greatest place now, but they're clearly taking the right steps to go in a different direction, and this could end up in a very significant upside for me if I play my cards right?
Yeah, two components to the answer to that good question. One is knowing yourself, right? You have to know that those type of settings are appropriate for you. We're all different. Some people are going to do much better going to work at a not stagnant, that's not the right word, a consistent, company, right? That from the company's perspective isn't a risk, even though my job or my role or my ability to perform is still critical, and want that stability. That's the old IBM job. as opposed to the people who have the iron stomach to actually get involved in a turnaround or, saving a business kind of approach. So first you got to realize that it is meant for you, and understand what that means. If you've done it before, great. Then you already know that's when you feel alive and you feel authentic, and you're just a glutton for punishment, and you drink Pepto-Bismol with your lunch. The second component I look for, and I would think is helpful and critical for those who want to consider this, is to really analyze the leadership and the financial backing of the company. And that's really hard from the company perspective when it's a turnaround as well, because you're trying to hire world-class talent. But how do you tell them, come join us, I promise I can pay you for the next 6 months. Beyond that, I don't know. And I can't pay you as much as you used to be making, but I'll make it up for you, in upside down the road. And that requires a leader who can create people who want to come to work for them, either because they've worked for them before, or they can create that followership and that energy with gung-ho feeling like, yeah, I want to be with this guy or gal, and I want to make this happen. And so you got to believe, if you're considering that, you got to believe in the leadership for really good reasons. Again, they've got a track record of having done it, and or you've worked with them before. And then the second part of that I was saying was the financing, right? Who is going to build and lay the concrete for this company to have enough runway for its plane to take off, right? Or at least to build enough to get to the next runway that's needed. And is there a plan around that? And are there investors who believe in the leadership team, who believe in the technology, the product, the services that this company has? And then if I add a third component, that you believe that there is momentum that could put A and B together to make C actually happen, and take off. So that's what I would say. And I'm going to expand one more time, which goes to the iron stomach, which is to make sure that you can afford to do this. Is this a risk that you can take at this point in your life based upon your personal values, your personal situation? The risks that I took, Jeremy, at 25, 27, 30, 32, were different than probably what I was willing to take at 35, 38, or 40. And by the way, now again at 58, I'm willing to take risk again. And I got the energy to do it.
Awesome. Well, from a team perspective, it's interesting you mentioned, working with people before. And I believe at the time we were working together, you had a few people on the organization that you brought in that you had worked with before. How often are you kind of bringing in that surgical strike team when you do find that opportunity? Is it pretty standard? There's a core group of people that, like you said, either they've got the stomach for it, they understand what the commitment is, and they're in for the high risk, high reward.
Yes, and there's another aspect, which is that you can have you speak shorthand with those people because you've worked with them before, you've done it before, you can read each other, right? It's like a basketball team maybe where the five guys have played, or gals have played together, for a year or two, and they anticipate each other. And so building that team and rebuilding that team, I do it all the time, and I strongly recommend go back to the well, to the people you've worked with before. One of the challenges I see both in startups and turnarounds is you have a bigger risk that a mistake could be a critical mistake, right? If I've got like I used to have a division of a large global multi-billion-dollar company, if we made a mistake, it probably wasn't even material, right? We could make 100 mistakes that were non-fatal. When you're in an early stage company or you're in a turnaround, the added stress and pressure that a decision or a risk or a mistake could be fatal is huge, right? So you have to have people who can methodically make smart decisions and also handle that type of pressure. When I've been in those situations also where you're financially constrained, I think you've seen me in this situation, Jeremy, before, where I've made a hiring mistake and then I failed to make an organizational change because I felt I couldn't afford to make the change. I couldn't afford to hire or couldn't hire the right expert that I needed. And so I hired the person I could get. And I think that's one, a mistake that I don't want to make again. And I think, when and it defied all of my hiring rationale and rules, because when I've looked at people,
haven't we?
yeah, when I look, when people have come in that work for me and they're interviewing people, for the next level, the directors that are going to work for the VPs, and they come into my office and say, yeah, I found the person who can do the job. Like, don't hire them. They look at me like, what are you saying? Don't hire them. Like, don't hire the person if you're going to come into my office and say, I think they can do the job. I want you coming to my office doing backflips, saying that you just found the greatest things in sliced bread, right, to do this job. Those are the A players. Those are the ones I want to see you come in with excitement and to hire. When you're in a turnaround or an early stage business, attracting that talent, if you don't know them already, is really, really hard.
So I want to kind of wrap things up here with something I think, based on your book, I'm very curious to get your insights on, and it's artificial intelligence. Obviously, you're talking about one of the inspirations you've seen is that we are so connected now, yet so disconnected at a human level. Obviously, with artificial intelligence, the human piece of society is getting a little blurred. And what is your perspective on artificial intelligence, and what do you see as kind of the risks maybe of how this could impact society in general, I guess, based on the perspective you have as written from your book?
Yeah, part of my perspective is that there's a lot of and in the world that needs to be recognized and not or. There's a lot that is gray and complex and not black and white. I talk in the book about development of so many different technologies that have made the world a better place and for good. But if those technologies are applied in a different way, they're actually could be used to tear down and destroy, right? Nuclear energy, at some point, about 20% of the world's energy comes from nuclear energy. It happens to be extremely clean and efficient. Well, guess what else you can do with nuclear energy? You can build a bomb, right? Um, AI, it's the same thing. The internet, you could be on the good web or you can be on the dark web, right? AI is the same thing. You're using it in your businesses today of how things can be done in your sleep by the computers, and it's done by the time you wake up in the morning, right? By AI agents that would have taken months or years to do and maybe not do right. So there's so much good that can come from this. What scares me is the bad side of it, the loss of human connection, right? The loss of our critical thinking. I look at how we have evolved with technology and just our devices. So the direct conversations and being in person with each other has devolved, you could say, into, okay, now we have virtual meetings, but at least there was another human being still. I'm still having a conversation with Jeremy McCarthy right now, right? Enter AI.
As you know.
It's good point. Good point. Like I can't tap on the screen and see if you're real or pinch you. When you bring AI into the equation, you now don't even need another human being to interact with on the other side, or so it's believed or perceived. And that's what scares me, right? Is that the importance of building communities, those shared spaces, as well as the ability to know who you are and to stop long enough, right, to get in touch with yourself at the in the beginning spaces. But those shared spaces, it's so critical to have human connection and to build relationships. It goes into the transcendent spaces. It start with the space for empathy. Empathy is based on human relationship. It's not what the AI agent tells you is feeling empathetic for you. It's human beings, it's leaders who care about people. I talk about someone, Jeremy, you and I both know, and I think was the source of our introduction, who's probably the most empathetic leader I've ever known in my life. Someone who, during, when we first worked together during the first, .com craze, and the AIDS epidemic was raging, and this head of HR, this woman, was up all night holding a towel on an employee's head who was up all night sick, from HIV. And then she comes into work the next day to do her job. You just can't replace that caring about each other as human beings. And what scares me about AI from that perspective is that we lose touch with each other. Therefore, guess what? We don't communicate with each other. And if we don't do that, then we don't have the ability to have effective conflict. That's the seventh primal space, is the ability to deal with conflict. And if you can't deal with conflict, then we can't grow, we can't learn, we can't solve problems, we can't build trusting relationships.
Great. One last question here for the executives listening. If somebody wanted to have a truly meaningful move in their career, so not just a better title or more compensation, but something where they could do their best work, make a real impact, what should they understand about themselves first, maybe in the context of your book, to take that step and go in the right direction?
Yeah, I'd go to so I created what's called the Primal Spaces Codex, which is really like a workbook companion to the book. The book is not prescriptive. So anyone who wants to think that they're going to read the book and it's going to give them their answers, it's not. It's consistent with what I'm hoping happens, which is we continue to be critical thinkers. However, enter the codex into the equation, and the codex helps create steps for application of reawakening the primal spaces for individuals. And so my answer in that context and in the context of the book is, when people are searching for that, is to actually look at your resume, look at the things that are on it that you've done as a reminder of that. And at the same time, lift from that the words and the experiences that brought you joy, that where you felt most authentic and alive, and come up with that list. They could also relate to your childhood. I talk in the book about my daughter when she was on stage and performing at performing arts school, and I watched her come out doing cartwheels. And I said to her, bottle that feeling, because that feeling is pure joy when you're doing something you love. And you don't know when it's going to come in your life again, but it will. And it might not be on stage. For her, it came from also helping patients and riding in the back of an ambulance. And she felt that same feeling again. So know what that feeling is, identify it in the things you've done in your career, and use those as the identifiers of what brings you joy, and align those against the opportunities before you or the opportunities you want to pursue, so that you can truly have joy and be being, if I can say that, be being the best person that you want to be, as Jeremy McCarthy, as Marc Kirshbaum, or whoever you are as an individual. And if we do that, Jeremy, then man, I still would have hope for the future, for future leaders, and for our society as a whole.
All right, I'm pumped. You sold me.
All right.
So I really appreciate you joining me. Importantly, where do you want to send people if they obviously are going to want to get the book?
Yeah. So the 11 Primal Spaces is available for pre-order. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and everywhere else. You can also go to my website, get there two ways, either markkirshbaum.com. And if you can't spell that, even though it's written right there, you can get there by going to 11primalspaces.com as well. Pre-order the book. It is shipping on August 4th. And I'm just super excited for people to join the 11 Primal Spaces movement. And you go to my website, you'll see that a movement has started around the creed that is a poem at the end of the book that summarizes all of the 11 primal spaces. And when I see people have this on their desk, have it in their major league clubhouse, sorry, it's not in San Francisco, but it's somewhere else, Jeremy.
Yeah.
And as an inspiration, then I'm being purposeful. And I really, really hope that this, no pun intended, takes fire and has a huge impact on people's lives as leaders and for our future.
Awesome. Well, I wish you the best. We'll obviously put a link down in the podcast here so people can more easily get it and they don't need to just remember what you told them. But it was a pleasure reconnecting with you, getting more info about the book, and getting some very interesting insights into executive recruiting, leadership, awareness. It was just a really fun discussion here with you today. So I will make sure everybody's got the information they need to reach you. And again, just really appreciate you joining me today.
Same, Jeremy. A lot of gratitude that we've continued this relationship, and wishing you huge success, great health, and continued impact on other people. You've certainly impacted me and my businesses, and I'm grateful for that.
Great. All right, everybody, take care.
Thanks.
We hope you have enjoyed today's show. If you are interested in being on a future podcast, please send an email to podcast@ventureloop.com.